into his office. Commander Nyland took his seat and motioned for Catherine to sit in the cushioned chair located on the opposite side of his desk. Catherine glanced around and swallowed nervously. She didn't like the looks of this. The great and almighty commander was frowning. Not that it was the least bit unusual. To the best of her memory, she couldn't remember him ever smiling. She quickly reviewed the cases she'd been working on for the past few days and could think of nothing that would warrant a tongue-lashing. Not that he needed an excuse, of course. The silence stretched to uncomfortable lengths as she waited for him to acknowledge her. It was on the tip of her tongue to remind him he was the one who'd called her into his office, but she'd be a fool to allow a hint of sarcasm into her voice. "I've been following your progress for the past several weeks." His indifferent blue gaze raked her features. Catherine had never been more aware of her appearance. Her thick dark hair was coiled in a businesslike knot at her nape, and her uniform jacket and skirt were crisp and freshly pressed. She had the impression if he found one crease, she'd be ordered to stand in front of a firing squad. No man had ever made her feel more self-conscious. He continued to stare at her, as if seeing her for the first time. There was no hint of appreciation for her good looks. Catherine wasn't conceited, but she was reasonably attractive, and the fact the man looked at her as if she were little more than a mannequin was vaguely insulting. Okay, she was being unreasonable, Catherine mused. If she had recognized a flicker of interest in those cobalt blue eyes of his, that would have been worse. "Yes, sir." "As I was saying," he continued, "I've had my eye on your work." She noted that he made a simple statement of fact without elaborating. If he'd been watching her, then she'd admit, not openly of course, that she'd been studying him too. He may be disagreeable, and to her way of thinking ill-tempered, but he was respected and generally well-liked. Personally, Catherine found him to be a real pain, but her thinking was tainted by a 4-week stint at standing duty on Friday nights. Politics existed in every office, but there seemed to be more in Bangor than the other duty stations Catherine had been assigned. As the executive officer directly below Captain Stewart, Commander Royce Nyland was empowered to run her legal office. He did so with a detached, emotionless ability that Catherine had rarely seen. In many ways, he was the best officer she'd ever worked with, and in others, the worst. It was apparent the man was a born leader. His lean, muscular good looks commanded attention. His office demanded it. Actually, now that she had an uninterrupted minute to analyze the commander, she was willing to admit he was fairly attractive. Not handsome in the classic sense. Appealing, she decided. Not ordinary. His features weren't anything that would cause a woman to swoon. His hair was nearly black. Its darkness, coupled with his deep blue eyes, was a contrast not easily ignored. He was broad-shouldered, and although she knew him to be of medium height, an inch or so under 6 feet, he gave the impression of power and strength in everything he did. Her scrutiny didn't seem to bother him. He leaned back in his chair, expelled his breath, and announced, "I'm pleased to tell you, I've chosen you as a substitute coordinator of the physical fitness program for the base." "Substitute coordinator," Catherine repeated slowly. Her heart beat dull and heavy before it dropped like a lead weight to her stomach. It took a second to right itself before she could respond. If there was one after-hours duty she would have done anything to avoid, it was that of coordinator of the physical fitness program. It was by far one of the least envied jobs on base. The Navy was serious about keeping men and women in top physical condition. Those who were overweight were placed on a strict dietary schedule and exercise regime. As coordinator, Catherine would be subjected to endless meetings to chart the individual's progress. She'd also be expected to formulate an exercise program designed specifically to meet each person's needs. In addition, she would be given the painful task of having someone discharged from the Navy if they failed to meet the requirements in regard to weight and fitness. "I believe you're qualified to handle this job effectively." "Yes, sir," she said, biting her tongue to keep from saying more. Tackling this duty, even on a substitute basis, meant she wouldn't have time to breathe. It was a time-consuming...